Okay, the question we have here today throws back to one of our recent episodes, which we can link for you in the show notes in case you want that as a reference point. But here's the question. Thank you for reframing introversion in your recent episode. It's such a misunderstood trait. Listening to your podcast confirmed for me that introversion isn't my blocker when it comes to marketing myself. Like you, I enjoy a good conversation. I love discovery calls. My true blocker is quite simply imposter syndrome. Shyness is a result or outcome of this. So, any tips for how to market yourself when imposter syndrome keeps getting in the way? Amy, what say you?
This is interesting. I mean, I see shy and imposter syndrome or complex, as it is sometimes called, as totally separate issues. Not that they don't have overlapping traits, but I
Mhm.
don't think that they're the same thing. So let's sort of pull them apart for a moment if we can. So I mean, I think being shy is a thing that you have to get over in business. And then, actually, what's popping into my mind. So then, if you try and get over it and you fake it, and then you feel like an imposter. So that's a very different thing. Maybe feeling like an imposter about a personality trait than feeling like an imposter about what you're qualified to do and to offer, right? So we want to untangle those. I think one of the tricky things in business when it comes to being shy is you're really called on to talk about yourself and to talk about what you offer. And I think, like, even if you're not shy, those are challenging things because we've been taught that those are not like attractive traits, right? That's not what you're supposed to do. I mean, you're taught that from childhood, really. Like, you don't want to be too showy, you don't want to be conceited, you don't want to be full of yourself. So I think when you can feel that way when you start talking about yourself, and it's necessary. I mean, I think you have to learn to do it. So I think that's the piece of shyness that you need to get over. I don't think you need to get over it. I'm not sure that you can get over it as a sort of a personality style. And I think it can be quite appealing, not to the point of self-deprecation, but to the point of being like a little bit of a gentler soul, perhaps. So that's how I think about shyness. Let me throw that over to you to take that piece, and then we can move into the imposter piece, even though I feel like you're a little bit twisted up as I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it's funny. I think they're intertwined too. And I think the correlation, because I think like shyness could be, I imagine it's sort of going down two paths. It's either like a quiet sort of reservedness, which I think is actually can be quite a powerful stance to operate from,
Mhm.
or it can be a like turning in or a smallening, not a word, of yourself because you don't feel confident about your place in a room in a conversation. And so, because this person has mentioned shyness alongside imposter syndrome, I wonder if that's more of the shyness they're talking about here. Like that feeling of being in a room where you're not sure that you belong, you're not sure that you know enough, that you are enough, that you have anything of value to the people around you. So therefore you sort of revert to being shy, being quiet, being small. That's my read. But again, like I'm definitely taking a few leaps or interpretations here. But does that resonate as sort of like that interplay between those two
It
concepts?
does. And it's hard to know, of course, specifically for this person, but I think, what's jumping out to me is I think this is really, well, we know that imposter complex or is really common for women. And it's particularly common in that, in some of the research that they've done, and you may be able to speak to this more articulately. Um, but in some of the
The
research they've
irony.
done where women will be asked to do a certain task or asked if they are capable or able to do a certain task, and they immediately go to diminishment, right? Like, oh, I'm not sure that I can, and am I good enough, and am I qualified enough? And this can be women who are super qualified and very well educated and professionals in the particular field in question, and they'll have all kinds of questioning and self-doubt, and they'll ask men this very same question, and often in this research, men who are less qualified, and they're very quick to be sure that they're capable. And so I think that that's sort of some ingrained sort of training and mindset that we're brought up with. And so I think that's another layer of this. Thoughts?
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah,
resonate
definitely.
there?
And that yeah, 100%. And that research always I always find it like such an insightful social commentary because it's like, for most of us, we exist in patriarchal societies and, therefore women are taught to be submissive, like, maybe not the best at anything, not necessarily sure of themselves, whereas men are taught to be like confident, self-assured, almost cocky sometimes. So it's such an interesting, interesting field of research that, and yeah, totally relevant. Because I actually do know who this question came from, and that person is a woman. And I'm sure Amy and I, we could probably also share experiences where, we felt perhaps trapped to an extent by the expectation that our gender sort of places on us to, when we're in conversations and in rooms. So yeah, relevant. And, I don't know if it's a rabbit hole we want to go down, but happy to if we so choose.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, that's not been a major player for me. Like in my life in general, it just hasn't been. I had more issues, I think, in that regard because I was very young when I started in business, and it was a long time ago, and it wasn't as common. And I think I felt like I wasn't being taken seriously because I was young and because I was a woman. I felt like if I was a younger man, I would have been seen as like, people would have been like impressed, like, oh, you've taken this on. And I felt instead people were like kind of giving me the side eye, like, really? Like, you really think you can do this? And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much of that was my own, internalized imposter complex or feeling insecure. But I haven't had that in that same sense of, being in a room and not feeling like I was equal to the conversation. In fact, I was kind of an ass and that I wanted to prove that I was not only equal, but maybe better in the conversation. Which I'm not bragging about that. I don't think that's a great quality, but it was a good survival quality. But we're not talking about me. Let's address this imposter complex in general, because I'm also, I mean, what springs to mind is the idea of fake it till you make it, which I'm not a fan of. I mean, I don't think faking it is good in any way, shape, or form. But I think owning how you feel can help you, and even owning how you feel out loud can sometimes help you to sort of position yourself in a conversation, in a room, in a client situation. What do you think about that? You're nodding your head. So
yes, like totally. I agree that fake it till you make it is just never a good strategy. I think it creates way more problems and insecurities than it solves. But yes, I think the thing you're talking about here is something I teach inside my programs, which is the idea of use of self. So that can take a bunch of different forms, but in this case, simply owning how you're feeling can actually create a really good environment for sharing your ideas and your expertise in a way that allows them to be seen. So in this case, like let's say, and I don't know how this person markets themselves, could it be, say, in a podcast interview, or is it in a networking capacity? Is it on a stage? But even in something like a podcast interview, if a host asks you a question and you're feeling that imposter syndrome, and that is sort of getting in the way of you being able to maybe access or articulate your response and therefore fully display your expertise, your value, etc. Even bringing in a part of yourself that's really present there by saying something like, it's so funny because I know the answer to this. And there's also some part of, being here on your platform that's making me feel a bit nervous, which I think is something that we all deal with. So give me a second to just, get my response right. So yeah, so I think that so even that can sort of really humanize you. And I think by putting words around like the elephant in the room, it kind of relaxes the atmosphere for everybody there. So even though it can seem counterintuitive, because I guess in that scenario, you're kind of naming your imposter syndrome, right? It's actually putting you in a really authentic place and a really relatable place. And you and I both know that so much of good marketing is know, like, and trust, right? And building that rapport through that honesty, that authenticity, and that presence. Does that make sense?
yeah, it makes great sense. I mean, I think it's that ownership, or, I've coached people to say in certain situations, this is a little uncomfortable for me, but here's what I think. Here's what I believe, and here's how I like to do this. Like almost if you could put that ownership language in front of it, and sometimes, I mean, often out loud, but sometimes even to yourself. I think that's part of accepting that, like, it is uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable and operate inside of that discomfort. And the interesting thing is, like in a business situation, you've already, whether you've acknowledged it or not, you've already sort of made that decision, right? Like you are forging ahead, and you're not going to be at your, I mean, especially early on, or even if, I mean, at every point there's something that's uncomfortable and you don't quite feel you have full ownership in. But I think this is a little bit going sideways a little bit, I think, but I think it's relevant. This whole journey of business ownership and entrepreneurship, I think, is all about that. It's about like keeping moving through these like personal limitations and boundaries in order to show up. And in order to do your best work, you have to sort of develop the interpersonal side, which can be your marketing skills, your sales skills, your talking to people skills, you're talking about what you do skills. And it's sort of I mean, this is sort of what my work is, right? This is what you have to do in order to like profit and do really well from your craft or your skill, is you have to take some ownership of how you lead, essentially. I think there are different levels of discomfort even as you grow. So, I mean, what do you think? I mean, how do you handle that? How do you mature into that? Is it a question of accepting that and realizing that and acknowledging that and like taking the deep breath and holding your nose and jumping in? I mean,
These metaphors. And yeah, just to add to you, and yes, like if you're listening, like Amy, I think is the queen of like this intrapersonal stuff insofar as like getting business. I learned that from you, Amy, so much about what I know about pitching people and pitching projects and putting myself forward for opportunities and showing up really well on a sales call. I learned from you. I would also add to that that part of my work is the intrapersonal communication, which is the conversations we have with ourselves, so in our own head. And I think this question is probably touching on both of those things, right? Like, yes, you need the skills to connect and communicate effectively with the people that you want to reach with your marketing. And you also need some skills and practice and just wisdom, I think, in terms of being able to communicate effectively with yourself and to get to a place where you're comfortable enough to make a move. Because mindset stuff is really tricky, right? It can bring us all down and does bring us all down at different points, in the business owning timeline. But that was a bit of a side note. So, Amy, I think back to your question about like, what does that look like? What do you do? I think there is some element in there where it is, doing the thing even when it's slightly uncomfortable. And I think actually there's a misconception, particularly when you're starting out in business, that the people who are marketing well, who are showing up consistently, they feel great, they feel ready, they feel like they are enough, know enough. I don't think that's always true. Sometimes, yes, but I feel like the thing that maybe differentiates them from the person who's feeling that imposter syndrome to the point of being frozen or not being able to act is that, the other person feels uncomfortable and does it anyway, right? Do you agree with that?
yeah, I do. I do. And I think, just looking at this question, and this person says, like you, I enjoy a good conversation. I love discovery calls. My true blocker is quite simply imposter syndrome, and shyness is a result or outcome of this. So, sort of in relation to what you were just saying, I'm thinking, well, if you love those things, like how do you take the things that you love and that you feel good at and you're comfortable with, and like not just amplify them, but how do you then think about them in these other realms where you feel less confident? Like, how do you borrow from that? Or do you borrow from that? Or do you know what I mean? Like that, to me, that's a foundation, right? Like it'd be very different if this person was saying, I can't do any of it, or I hate it, or I don't want to do it, but they're already acknowledging that they're good and comfortable at something. So is that just the beginning of growth? And what we need to say to you is just, be bold and, find the support to keep on growing and leaning into those things. I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. It's so good. Like this person clearly has a foundation there to build on. And actually looking at this piece of the question, thank you for bringing me back there. I was going off down a random side road. I wonder if the thing that's tricky for this person is moving from connecting with someone, because they say, I enjoy good conversation, I love discovery calls, to actually selling or talking about the value they bring. I wonder if that part of the conversation is where this imposter syndrome sort of shows up and gets in the way. In which case, if that is true, and I mean, as always, Amy, we're working with some hypotheticals and some somewhat informed guesses here. I wonder if what could be helpful there is a reframe, or maybe just an illumination of the fact that when you are on a discovery call, for example, it's not as though the way you interact with someone is different when you're building rapport versus when you're actually talking about working together in a paid way. It's just a continuation of that conversation because, as you're getting to know the person, getting to know what they want and need, what they're scared of, the ways they've been disappointed before in relation to the thing that you might be offering them, it's just the next step in that conversation. It's not like you all of a sudden have to like whip out your shiny salesman hat and like your little salesman suit.
I am. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. You're nodding there. Is that, please add your thoughts.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's incremental, and I think it's something that you build on, and I love like sort of digging into this and seeing there are pieces that are already comfortable, and because they go on to further say that shyness is a result or an outcome. So any tips on how to market yourself when imposter syndrome keeps getting in the way? And the interesting thing about what you were just saying is like there's already this comfort level happening in pieces of this equation. And those pieces, I think in many ways are the more, or for many people are the more challenging thing, right? Because it's one thing, to say something in your own little room on your keyboard. It's another thing to be, have other people in that room and, and having to interact with them. And so I think for the marketing piece of that is, I guess for me, it comes back to what I call your, like your manifesto and your stake in the ground. Like, what do you really care about? And like, what do you like just bedrock believe in? Because that should be a place that you feel comfortable expressing yourself, right? And so, and most of those ideas, when we drill down and look at them, they can be broken up into a lot of little pieces and a lot of little parts. And that's how you market yourself. And that's how you break through that, is you find the things that you absolutely believe in and believe. I mean, I will say no to be true. And that's where you get your grounding. That's like you find, and I guess what I'm saying is, or dancing around, is you find the place where you don't feel like an imposter and you build from there. Because I think marketing is very different than the things we've been talking about. Like, well, certainly like interacting with other people. I mean, all the interpersonal stuff is at play in both situations. If this person feels like they feel like an imposter, right? They don't, whatever that means to them, they don't feel qualified to be in the conversation in the room. And then they become shy. So they're reticent, they're held back. But then they're asking, okay, if those things are true and they exist, then how do I market myself? What do you separate out? Because what is marketing? I mean, is it like, I mean, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people in a lot of situations, but to me, marketing yourself means promoting what you do and connecting with the people who might be interested in that from a business point of view.
This is such a good question because it probably leads us to what could be a really valuable reframe for this person, anyone else listening who is feeling like they can relate to this, in that I think at its core, marketing is just connecting with the people you can help. As you say, it sounds like this person already has some building blocks to that, right? They like being in conversation with people who I'm guessing are theoretically prospects. They love discovery calls, right? They're eager, they're curious, they're able to build rapport and connect. So as you say, those are really useful skill sets and comfort zones to have. And I think part of the deal of being in business is that if you are growing your business or your skill set in any way that's meaningful for you, it doesn't always have to be financial, Amy and I are always talking about that. But I feel like there is an element that you are inherently going to be at some level of discomfort at most times, right? Mm-hmm. And for some use cases, it's about, okay, finding like the experiment that you can bear. Like, okay, like what is like uncomfortable, but like kind of sort of comfortable enough, or like that the potential outcome is motivating enough that I'm willing to try, I'm willing to do it. And that is the way in which you slowly stretch and skill build and all of those things.
I love that. I think that's perfect. And I think the practice of doing that will naturally bring you wins in lots of different categories, right? Whether it's, the feedback that you get, it's the way that you feel. Maybe it means you land a project and it does have a financial outcome. But I think as you string those together, you feel more confident. So I think that's actually the game and the work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I
Consistently, right? Like I'm still playing that game. Are you still playing that game, Amy? You've been in
Of
business
course
for
you are. I
decades.
mean, I think you played that game till you're dead. I mean, right? I mean, as long as you're alive, I mean, and growing and ideally that's what you want to do. You don't want to be, become stagnant, that you want to, keep being interested in things and growing and changing, and you're going to run up against those things. And that's, I mean, for me, I mean, those things are challenging. I mean, for me personally, but I mean in general, but I also think that's the beauty, right? That's the growth. That's the becoming more than you are and more in all the capacities and more fulfilled and all the things. So I think it's very worthwhile, in fact.
Think so too. I feel like it's like the best character development there is. It's how we become like rich and storied and I think have so much more to offer. And as well, I think we forget too that often in business, I mean, depending on what your business is and who you serve and what you sell, but the people that you can help and work with often have similar kinds of experiences. The context and the details might be different, but the experience of maybe like not being ready enough or X enough or Y enough, or of sort of holding yourself back because you're scared of, being found out, whatever that looks like, that can actually be a nice bridge to build rapport with people. And as we always speak about, there's so much value in being someone knowable and someone human and someone relatable. All of those things actually, I think, really important pieces of your marketing, especially in the here and now where, do we still need to say, in the era of AI, but, especially here and now where there is actually so much value to being able to meet someone on a really human level.
The thing that I have been thinking about and writing about and talking about a lot is empathy marketing and the idea of moving from the idea of selling deliverables to the idea of selling solutions. And I think the way that you do that, the way you sell solutions is by understanding the problems and understanding the problems or understanding the problems people are up against. And what I mean by that, it's like, yes, a deliverable, a thing might solve the problem, but the problem isn't like say you need a new website. The problem isn't that you need a new website. The problem is that website needs to do something for you. So there are layers of the onion to peel back. But aside from needing that, the person needs it for some reason that's not just generating income, or there's emotion attached to everything, and what drives people. And so I think, and this may seem like we're going off into left field, or I'm going off into left field, but I think the point being that your best work is going to be in solving problems. And so like the person that you are going to serve inherently has some problems. And so you're meeting on equal ground, or you're meeting on common ground anyway. And so the more that you can lean into that and understand them, the more willing they're going to be to understand you. And I think the more confident you feel in that, because that's where your expertise lies and that's where the connection is made. And I don't know, you wrap this up and tell me if that was too obscure or too obtuse, but it made sense
No,
to me.
it made sense to me too. And actually, the email you sent on empathy marketing this week was so good as well. So anyone else on Amy's list can probably attest to that too. I think to wrap this up, I just want to give two like practical tips, specifically in relation to the imposter syndrome element. I think for all of us, there are certain environments or spaces where our imposter syndrome or complex is more likely to flare up, whether that's, if you're comparing yourself to other people on social media, or, maybe you're in groups where the general vibe is like everybody's like puffing out their feathers and boasting, or like whatever that is. I think when you're aware that a space is doing that to you, exit it. Right? It's good to know what your competitors are up to, but only insofar as it gives you helpful ways to position yourself, not if it's going to make you feel like a piece of shit. So really practical tip, exit the spaces that make you feel bad or less than. Yeah, you're laughing, Amy.
Oh, I am laughing. I'm laughing because I agree with you, but I'm also like thinking of something that just happened to me yesterday where a really good friend of mine asked me if I could translate Bad Bunny. And I'm like, oh my God, I've so misrepresented myself if you think like that's my level of Spanish. I'm very good in the pharmacy or the grocery store, but no, I can't translate Bad Bunny for you. I felt like such an imposter. It's like, have I misled you?
Clearly you come across as so bilingual. I also, for some reason, have this image in my head of you translating and doing his like really cool hip thrusts. I hope that was part of the imagined deal. Yeah, imposter syndrome there too, Amy. The other practical piece of advice I want to offer, like you're building on what you offered, Amy, with empathy marketing, and really the crux of, I think, marketing and selling being about problem solving. Just remember that if you have a possible solution for someone, it actually doesn't serve either person in that conversation to hold it back, right? And I think if you bring this back to a real life scenario, like, I was walking down getting lunch at the beach yesterday, and this person who was, well, with accent, well, anyway, they were on holiday in Sydney, not from Australia. They asked me, hey, like, is this a good beach to swim at? And it normally is, but there were blue bottles there yesterday. So, of course, I was going to offer them that, right? I don't want them to go swimming in a swarm of jellyfish and go home covered in stings. So, like, even a real life example like that, I think could be helpful. So I offered them, it usually is, but don't go in there today because you're going to get stung. If you walk 2 kilometers around the headland, you'll actually find a better beach. It's going to be protected from this northerly wind. So something like that, right? I could have chosen not to offer them the solution that I had. I think by doing that, of course, in a business context, remember that the person you're speaking with does have free will. They can hear about what you have to offer and they can decide it's not for them. They can decide it's not the right thing to invest in now. So I think in a way, by not promoting yourself and showing how you can help them solve a problem that you now have understood and you've heard and you've reflected back to them, I think not only are you not serving yourself, but you're also kind of diminishing their ability to choose and decide and make informed decisions. So if that's another helpful reframe to take with you, have at it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great example. And I like that you brought it into something that was more day to day, because like, of course, in that context, it makes perfect sense. But why wouldn't it make why would it make sense in the context of business and your knowledge and your expertise? Like, why wouldn't you be that gracious and that kind? Because you just would be. I mean, that's sort of how we relationship, right? And it's not any different because, there's the potential of money, transacting or exchanging. So I think it's and it's just a good plane to think of it on. And with that, I mean, I think we've exhausted this, probably beyond. Sorry, dear listener.
Sorry.
It's entirely possible.
I think so. We might have gone too far in this episode. I hope that there have been some things here that have been really helpful and useful. Amy, can you outro us in Spanish?
No, por favor.
Oh, very good. No. So if you have got something out of this episode, we would love it if you would leave us a review. It really helps us expand our reach with this podcast. If you have a question that you would like us to tackle on a future episode, head on over to businessbadass.co. And otherwise, we'll be back in your ears next week with a fresh episode and perhaps less rambling.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Bye for now.
If you've enjoyed listening to us share our insights on this episode and you want more, head to the links in the show notes to find where you can sign up to be on our newsletters. So Amy's newsletter delivers weekly insights on how to build and grow a sustainable business that fills your coffers and feeds your soul. And my newsletter is all about optimizing your communication skills and habits. So the link in the show notes will take you to my assessment that will help you pinpoint your communication style and give you some strategies to improve and optimize things this week.